This was my elo before playing Fossil Cup, and this is my elo after playing Fossil Cup. You might notice I didn't post a video last week because I threw a little tantrum after I dropped all those points and I just didn't feel like uploading anything. So, I did manage to regain all those points in Ultra League. I didn't play Fossil Cup anymore, and I refuse to touch Fossil Cup ever again. It is the most RPS Cup I have ever played, and yeah, that's where we're gonna leave it. But like I said, I managed to regain all of my elo in Ultra League, and I was also a little bit annoyed at myself that I didn't record any of those games. However, because I managed to regain so many points in Ultra League, I am planning on making a video with all of the teams to show you all of the teams that I used, because regaining all of those points wasn't easy. I also used a bunch of teams that were really accessible and easy to build, so before Ultra League comes back, I am going to post a video showing you guys some of the teams that I used to climb back up. But now we are at the mercy of Master League. It's getting late in the season, I'm getting desperate, we're gonna make some stupid investments. Now, I've never been the biggest player of Pay to Win Cup because I don't usually have good Pokemon for Master League. I've been trying to get a Landorus Therian for the longest time ever. I couldn't even get a 98 with 15 attack. So when I say stupid investment, I mean we're gonna build this 14 attack Landorus, and yeah, this thing, in my opinion, is the most OP Pokemon in this cup, and I just had to make it. I don't care that it has 14 attack, but if you're watching this video, I do not recommend you build a Pokemon with 14 attack for Master League. You are going to lose CMP, and in a lot of cases, when you lose CMP, it is going to cost you a match. But it is lucky, so the Stardust cost wasn't too bad, and I did have to invest in Elite TM to get that Sansir Storm. However, it's those Excel candies that I am really going to struggle to get again if I do get a better one in the future, because where I live we have a very small Pokemon Go community. So for legendary raids, I am usually on my own or depending on raid apps, which have really long queues because of that really annoying remote raid limit. This is why I don't usually play Master League, because I am not lucky with these legendaries, and sometimes a Dragonite is just not going to cut it for you, and for some reason, my Hundo Dialga, which took me years to get, has now gone obsolete because of Dialga Origin, which I also do not have. But the 98 Landorus Therian ended up working perfectly fine for me, even if it has 14 attack. I went positive. This Landorus is OP, let me tell you, it does not have a solid answer for it in the meta. Even against Kyogre, it is going to be able to hit those Sansir Storms very quickly, and it is going to be debuffing your attack. It is one of the best Pokemon in the Master League. That's why I absolutely had to build it. But the team I ended up using and going positive with is Xerneas Lead with Palkia Origin and Landorus Therian on the save swap. This is by far not an original team at all. So many people use this team, but it is one of the best teams in the Master League. It's extremely effective, and it gets all A's on PvPoke. That being said, the first two sets that I played when Master League came back, I used Ho-Oh in place of Palkia. I ended up going negative and learning that Palkia was much better. But I was learning in those sets to adjust to the meta, adjust to my opponent's playstyle, and then later I changed up my playstyle based on what I was seeing. So I included one of those sets at the beginning here, and then we will get into the games that I played with the team that you see in the infographic. Now, when I was running Ho-Oh, there is one Pokemon that I struggled a lot against. Can you take a guess what it was? No, it wasn't Kyogre, because I know this entire team is weak to Kyogre, but surprisingly, I wasn't seeing that many of them, probably because of how popular Palkia is. But I was struggling against Landorus, and a lot of people were using it as a save swap against Xerneas when they lost the lead. So I had to stay in with Xerneas. I couldn't swap immediately into my own Landorus because I would lose that matchup. I also couldn't swap into my Ho-Oh because a Stone Edge one-shots. So what did I do? I stayed in with Xerneas. I had to throw a move. Usually they would shield. If they would think it was a Moonblast, they would shield it. Sometimes they don't. But that is one of the Pokemons that was giving me a really hard time. I was also struggling against opposing Ho-Ohs and opposing Palkias. So in the end, I just decided Palkia was just a much better option than Ho-Oh. You can see in this first match, because I wasn't able to deal with my opponent's Landorus and Ho-Oh, my Xerneas ends up with very little health to deal with this Palkia. I have to take an Aqua Tail here, and the Palkia is going to be able to win this because I am not going to be able to make it to a move, and unfortunately I am going to take a loss there. Moving on to this next match, we're going to see a Zacian on the lead, and I have to go for these Moonblasts because the close combat is going to be resisted and it is going to be debuffing us. Go for the first Moonblast, it lands, and now I have to make a decision if I want to use a shield or not. My opponent goes for Play Rough, and it puts us roughly in about the same health range as they are now. I swap out into my Landorus because I have to draw out a Palkia if they have it, but they go for a Play Rough, I end up shielding that, and then they swap into a Zygarde. Okay, at least the Zygarde is out, and we are not going to have Ho-Oh up against Zygarde, right? Anyways, this is just the longest matchup ever. I'm just going to go for a Sandsear Storm, debuff the Zygarde, and now these crunches are not doing much damage to our Landorus. Gonna go for another Sandsear Storm. We're able to spam these out super quickly. Again, this is why I really like Landorus. And now I'm gonna let the crunch go. It's not gonna be enough to take us out, but then our opponent swaps out into their Zacian and they farm us down. This is not good because our opponent has enough energy to reach a Wild Charge. I invest my shield. My opponent's final Pokemon is going to be a Landorus. I do not have any shields left. A Stone Edge is going to one-shot, and I swap into Zacian here. There's nothing I can do because a Sandsear Storm is going to be enough to take us out. They are going to be able to reach that Stone Edge to take our Ho-Oh out. They even had a shield left, and unfortunately, we're going to take another loss there. Again, another situation where Palkia would have been so much better in the back. On to the next battle, we see another Palkia lead, which is a good lead for us, but I was anticipating that my opponent was going to swap into that Landorus. I stay in with my Xerneas. I am going to bait this time with the close combat because I was realizing that my opponents were shielding if they thought it was a Moonblast. We take a shield from them, and then I swap into my own Landorus. I thought my opponent doesn't have a reason to bait here, so I went ahead and I shielded the first move. They went for a Sandsear Storm, and now I'm in a situation where I'm wondering if I should let this go. I should have just let this go and then gone for another Stone Edge, but my opponent swaps out into Palkia. I ended up using both of my shields on my Landorus, and I'm not going to be able to reach a second move against the Palkia. At least my Xerneas is still going to be on their Palkia, and they are going to be able to reach an Aqua Tail before I go for that Moonblast. I am not sure why I didn't throw it immediately as soon as I got it, but gonna go for this Moonblast here now, and my opponent lets it go. They have one shield left, keep that in mind, and their final Pokemon is going to be a Duskmane Necrozma, and this is not good for me. I am switch-locked into my Xerneas right now. They end up farming us down, and their Landorus here is still alive. This is where I mess up. I should have just swapped out into my own Landorus after the second Incinerate. Then they wouldn't have been able to Mudshot us down. They would have had to stay in. I would have either Mudshot them down, or my opponent would have to throw a move, and then they wouldn't have enough energy to reach a Stone Edge on our Ho-Oh. But they reach the Stone Edge on Ho-Oh. They take Ho-Oh out, and then Necrozma is going to be able to take our Landorus out. Even though we have two moves, we're not going to be able to throw the second one because they are at a move. You guys get the point. We end up dropping a little bit into the 2700s, but it's still not too bad. And I'm just going to move ahead now and show you guys the games that I played with Palkia. Now we're going to start winning. In this first game, I see a Dialga Origin on the lead, which is a pretty good lead for Xerneas. My opponent immediately swaps into Groudon. Now, I'm not going to bring in Palkia, I'm going to bring in my Landorus because Landorus is going to be resisting those Precipice Blades, and I don't want to invest any shields in this matchup. I'm okay with taking a couple of Fire Punches against the Groudon. We're still able to take it out with our Landorus, and then my opponent is going to bring their Dialga back in. I'm able to land a Sandsear Storm, and now I am going to bring my Xerneas back in, but my opponent swaps out immediately into their own Landorus. Okay. I'm going to immediately swap into my Palkia. I can take a Sandsear Storm, and then I am going to start spamming out these Aqua Tails. The opponent and I both have our shields left, so of course they go ahead and invest their first shield on the Aqua Tail. I'm gonna have to start investing shields into my Palkia if I'm going to weaken this Landorus with Palkia, so I invest one and then I go for an Aqua Tail, take my opponent's final shield, and at this point I'm okay with letting Palkia go, but I live with 1 HP, which I wasn't expecting, and I swap immediately into Xerneas. I know this is only a Sanseer Storm, so I'm okay with taking it, and now all I have to do is build up to 2 close combats, because one is going to be enough to take the Landorus out. I'm going to be able to reach a second one on the Dialga, and our opponent is going to go ahead and top left, and we're going to take that win. GG's to the opponent. Moving on to the next battle, we're going to see another Dialga on the lead. Again, this is an okay lead for Xerneas. I just have to watch out for the Iron Heads. I am going to go ahead and shield my Xerneas because I really want to take care of this Dialga with the Xerneas. So I'm going to go for a close combat here. I'm okay with debuffing myself as long as I'm shielding the Iron Head's. Going to go for another close combat, and my opponent invests both of their shields on this Dialga. I'm able to reach a third close combat, and we get the Dialga into the red, and now I bring in my Palkia. My opponent has no shields left, so I should be able to land a Spatial Rend on this Zygarde. But is it going to be enough to take it out? I don't think it is. This Zygarde is super bulky. Of course, they live the Spatial Rend with a little bit of HP, but at least I am going to be able to bring in my Xerneas and farm this thing down and have a ton of energy for the next Pokemon that is going to come in. I was expecting something that would counter fairies. My opponent has a Kyogre. At least I'm able to land a Moonblast on the Kyogre, and I have a shield left, so I'm going to go ahead and shield the Surf, and I should be able to reach a Stone Edge against the Kyogre, and for some reason my opponent brought in their Dialga there and let me farm them down. But they go ahead and top left because they know I'm going to be able to reach a move on my Landorus, and they're not going to be able to win that. Moving on to the next battle, we're going to see a Zacian on the lead, and I don't really have a solid answer to this on my team, so I'm just going to stay in with my Xerneas and try to weaken it, get it into Aqua Tail range before I swap out into my Landorus. I swap into Landorus and draw out a Zygarde, which I'm okay with because that means my Palkia is not going to see this Pokemon. Now, I'm just going to go for these Sanseer Storms and debuff my opponent as much as I can. They're just going to go for these crunches, which aren't going to do that much damage. I should be able to survive another one and reach another Sanseer Storm, but my opponent is going to be able to farm my Landorus down. But even with all that energy, my opponent is not going to be able to do much damage to the next Pokemon if they decide to stay in because they were super debuffed. So I bring in Palkia, expecting my opponent to throw a move, but they swap out, of course, to clear the debuff, and they bring in a Landorus of their own. This is okay. I have my Palkia aligned to the Landorus now. I can no-shield the first move and then start going for these Aqua Tails. I'm going to have to start shielding my Palkia now, however, if I want to take care of this Landorus. They let me land the next Aqua Tail, and now let's see what they decide to bring back in. They bring in their Zygarde. Okay. I'm gonna let this go. I thought they might go for an Earthquake, but they go for a Crunch, and I survive. I'm gonna be able to take them out with a Moonblast, and I should be able to reach a close combat on the Zacian. I know they have a shield left, but I also have an Aqua Tail stored on my Palkia, so they know that. They let the close combat go, and I'm able to take that win. GG's to the opponent. On to the next battle, we see a terrible lead of Ho-Oh. I swap into my Landorus, and then I make a huge mistake and I let my opponent sneak in an entire Incinerate. I threw on alignment. That was such a new move from me, but it just happened. What am I gonna do? I'm able to bait with the Sanseer Storm, take my opponent's first shield, and then I go for a Stone Edge on the next move. I take my opponent's second shield, and then they swap out into a Zacian. Okay, their Ho-Oh is still alive. This is not great for me. We both don't have any shields left, but I'm able to land a Sanseer Storm on the Zacian. Hopefully my opponent isn't running Double Fairy, but the Ho-Oh Double Fairy is a very common team. If they're running it, it's not going to be good for me. I'm going to go for a Moonblast up against the Zacian. This should be enough to take the Zacian out, and I'm expecting my opponent to bring that Ho-Oh back in, so I'm immediately going to swap into my Palkia. And look at that, another fairy type in the back. and it is the absolute wall to Palkia. Of course, my opponent is going to be running a Tapu Bulu, so I'm going to go ahead and top left and take a loss there. Tapu Bulu is one of those Pokemons that I really wish I had for the Master League, but there's only so much that I can build for Master League. I'm lucky to have the 3 Pokemon that I'm using right now. Anyways, moving on to the next battle, we are going to see another Dialga lead, and I'm just going to go for these close combats up against this Dialga. They invest no shields. I invested a shield just so that I could ensure that the Dialga was going to be out of the way, and then they bring in a Landorus and debuff us with a Sanseer Storm before swapping out into their own Palkia. Now my opponent has 2 shields left, so they were probably expecting us to bait with an Aqua Tail against their Palkia. They let the Spatial Run go. I'm able to take them out, and then all they have left is their Landorus. I'm going to bring in my own and go for a Stone Edge up against this thing and take my opponent's final shield. But my opponent knows that if I take their final shield here, I am going to be able to reach a move on my Xerneas. So they are going to go ahead and let their Landorus go, because either way, I should be able to win that. GG's to the opponent, and that is going to be a 4-1 set, taking us back into the 2800s, where we started off in the video, by the way, but at least we're climbing. We're climbing, right? Now, I did play another set before the set that I'm going to show you guys, and I want positive, but for the sake of time, I'm going to leave those battles out. Otherwise, this video is going to be extremely long. Anyways, moving on to the next battle, we are going to see a Dialga on the lead, which is a really nice lead for us. We managed to take a shield from them with our close combat, and of course, I'm going to go ahead and shield the Iron Head. Now my opponent swaps into Giratina, probably trying to catch a close combat, but I managed to throw the Moonblast on the Giratina. It gets them into the red, and then I swap out into my Palkia, and this is where I make a huge mistake. It's pretty obvious that my opponent was trying to draw out a Dragon Breath user. Because of what they have in the back, they're obviously going to have an answer to Xerneas in the back. I bring Xerneas back in, my opponent is going to go for an Iron Head and take my final shield, and my opponent is going to have a Ho-Oh in the back. I am switch locked. I don't have any shields left. This Ho-Oh is absolutely going to destroy my Landorus. Unfortunately, they even have a shield left. I'm not going to be able to win that, so I go ahead and I top left. Moving on to the next battle, we are going to see an amazing lead of Palkia, and as expected, my opponent is going to use Landorus as a safe swap. I'm going to let the Sanseer Storm go, and then I usually bait on the close combat, but this time I go for a Moonblast and they actually shield it. Sometimes they don't shield it, but this time they did. And then I am going to bring in my Palkia and go for an Aqua Tail up against this Landorus. I'm not expecting them to shield this because they used a shield on the Moonblast. But unfortunately they live. They're able to get a second Sanseer Storm off on our Palkia. That's just unfortunate. And then they are going to bring in a Zacian. I am going to be able to reach 2 Aqua Tails at least up against the Zacian, but we are double debuffed, so they're not going to be doing that much damage. They have half of their health left, and they have so much energy built up because they completely farmed our Palkia down. I bring in Landorus, I shield the play rough, and then they swap into Palkia. I'm going to swap immediately into my Xerneas, and I'm going to go for a Moonblast. I'm trying to think of how I can win this now because it's going to get really tricky, but at least I'm able to get the close combat off on the Palkia, and that should put it in Sanseer Storm range. Now, I need to try to leave this matchup with energy on my Landorus because I need to land a Stone Edge on the Zacian. I'm going to go for a Sanseer Storm up against the Palkia, and I use my final shield for the Aqua Tail, but I should be able to live a play rough from the Zacian, and then I am going to be able to reach that Stone Edge, take the Zacian out, and we are going to take that win. GG's to the opponent. Now you guys, this next match is going to be something. You guys will see. We lead Xerneas into Primarina, and Primarina is extremely difficult for my team to deal with. If I'm not able to land a move on it from Xerneas, it will be able to charm me down completely and have a ton of energy for the next Pokemon that I bring in the back. And guess what? That's exactly what my opponent is going to do in this match. I'm not able to land a Moonblast on this Primarina. I have to bring in my Landorus because Primarina absolutely walls Palkia. And I really have to hope that my opponent is going to let me land a move on this thing, and I really don't want them to swap out. but they swap out into a Tyranitar, and now I'm in a really tricky situation. So I go for a Sanseer Storm. It's not enough to take the Tyranitar out, and then I panic and I swap into my Palkia. There's absolutely no way I'm going to win this, right? Well, I left with a move on my Landorus at least. We know that. And it looks like I am going to be able to reach 2 Aqua Tails up against this Primarina, and that is going to be enough to take it out. My opponent's final Pokemon is a Hisuian Avalugg. I'm able to reach an Aqua Tail up against the Hisuian Avalugg, and that gets it into Sanseer Storm range. We're going to be able to bring in our Landorus. Thank goodness the game didn't lag. If it lagged, I would have lost that. But I am able to land the move on the Avalugg, take the Avalugg out, and somehow I got away with the win in that game. GG's to the opponent and a very interesting team. Moving on to the next battle, we are going to see a Xerneas mirror match, and my Xerneas should be able to win this because I have the Buddy Boost on Xerneas, so I should be able to win CMP and get the Moonblasts off before my opponent can get their moves off. Now, they go for a close combat here for some reason, and I figure this is going to be the Moonblast, but I should be able to live it, and I can go for a close combat of my own. My opponent decides to shield it, and I'm thinking I bring in my Landorus here because Landorus is going to be able to reach that Sanseer Storm before my opponent can reach a move, but then they swap out into Kyogre, and now my Palkia is going to be aligned to their Kyogre. I can easily take this Thunder, that's completely fine, and then I can go for a Spatial Rend to take this Kyogre out. I farmed up extra energy, that way I can have an Aqua Tail ready to go if my opponent decides to bring that Xerneas back in. They don't, they bring in an Avalugg. I have so much energy on this Palkia, I'm even going to be able to reach another Aqua Tail, and my opponent is going to have to invest their final shield, so I swap out into my Landorus and snipe them with the Sanseer Storm, and then my opponent gives up because I have 2 shields left. There is no way they're going to be able to take our Landorus out, and we are going to take that win. GG's to the opponent. Moving on to the final battle of the video, we're going to see an amazing lead of Palkia, and as expected, my opponent swaps into Landorus. I'm really hoping that these Palkia leads scare away Ho-Oh because I really want to keep running my Xerneas lead. Anyways, I stay in, I take a shield from them and bait with a close combat, and then I swap out into my Palkia. I'm perfectly fine with taking a Sanseer Storm. I'm going to go for an Aqua Tail here, but they are going to be able to live and make it to another Sanseer Storm. It's not going to be enough to take us out, but at least my opponent is not going to get a ton of farm on my Palkia. I have to wait out my switch timer here because I'm expecting my opponent's final Pokemon to be a better answer to Xerneas, and I am switch locked in against this Duskmane Necrozma, but then I'm able to save all that energy on my Xerneas, swap into my Landorus. My opponent goes for a Sunsteel Strike. We manage to shield it, and then my opponent goes ahead and top lefts. That is going to be a 4-1 in the set, taking us into the really high 2800s. We're getting really close to Legend. Maybe tomorrow's the day that we finally reach it, but you never know in this game. One day you'll perform really well with the team, and then the next day you'll just get hard counter. I don't know. We'll see. But that is going to be the end of our video. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you guys like my content, please consider subscribing. Maybe leave a like. It helps me out so much. And I will see you guys in the next video, which I'm really hoping is going to be a Legend push. If it's not, oh well. Okay, bye-bye.